I thought I was being a good friend when I forced my wife to sleep outside in a snowstorm, so my sick best friend could take our hotel room. But I had no idea she was already planning what I'd lose when we got back home, including everything I care about. Hello, all. I know this is going to look bad. I know people are probably going to jump straight to calling me heartless or stupid or some mix of both. My wife and I were supposed to have a weekend away, just the two of us, nothing fancy. Things between us had been tense for months. Work stress, constant little arguments, feeling disconnected. You know how marriages get when you're both tired and not really paying attention. We booked a cheap hotel near the mountains, more to force ourselves out of the house than anything romantic. I figured being away from our usual routines would give us a chance to reset a bit. The problem is my best friend Dylan has always been part of my life in a way that sometimes makes everything else take a back seat. I'm not trying to make excuses, I'm just trying to explain why I reacted the way I did that night. I've known him since we were kids. We grew up together. He's one of those people I always felt responsible for, even as adults. He has health issues he always talks about, or emotional dips, and I'm usually the one who steps in. My wife never liked this. She said he drains me and uses me, but I always brushed that off. I thought she just didn't understand him. Anyway, the snowstorm hit harder than expected. We were already checked into the hotel when Dylan called saying he felt sick and was stranded not far from where we were staying. He said he was shivering, dizzy, maybe feverish. I didn't even think I just said I'd come get him. My wife immediately had that look, the one she gets when she knows something is going to turn into a mess. She told me we were supposed to be focusing on each other and that he could deal with one night on his own. But I pushed back. I told her I couldn't leave him alone in a snowstorm if he was sick. We picked him up. It already felt tense in the car, but he looked rough enough that I didn't question anything. When we got to the hotel, the front desk told us every room was booked. The storm had pushed a bunch of people off the road and they filled up fast. My wife said that was that. He'd have to either sleep in the car or ride back to town. Dylan clutched his chest like he was in pain, said the cold made it hard to breathe. He always had these dramatic episodes, and I always felt like the only person who took him seriously. My wife kept saying this wasn't her problem, and that she wasn't about to give up her bed for him. I told her it was one night and we'd figure it out in the morning. That's when the argument broke out in the hallway. Not yelling, but sharp and cold. She said she wasn't going to freeze so my grown adult friend could take priority again. I told her he was sick and she was overreacting. I insisted she could sleep in the car with the heater on because it was only a few hours. I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing morally, choosing compassion or whatever. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't angry. It was just done, like something in her shut off right there. She grabbed her coat, walked past both of us, and left without another word. I figured she'd calm down. I figured it was temporary. I checked on Dylan, got him situated in the room, and I went to sleep thinking we'd laugh about this someday. That's probably the stupidest part of all of this, how certain I was that this wasn't a serious problem. She didn't come back in the morning. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her car was gone. I assumed she drove home on her own because she was furious. I tried not to panic. I checked us out early, drove Dylan home, and then rushed back to our place. Her car was there, but she wasn't. The house looked normal. Nothing thrown around. No notes. I waited a few hours, and then longer. Finally, she texted me one sentence saying she was safe and staying somewhere else for a while. No explanation. No details. I didn't even have time to process that because the second I walked inside, I noticed subtle things missing. Her toiletries, a few bags of clothes, some drawers half empty. It wasn't everything, just enough to make me feel sick. Every time I called, she ignored it. Every text got short, flat replies. Not angry ones, just nothing, like talking to a stranger. Now it's been several days. My wife still isn't home. Dylan keeps checking in on me and saying she's being dramatic, but even he sounds unsure now. Update 1. My wife didn't come home with me right away after the incident. She disappeared for a couple of days without saying where she was going. I assumed it was to cool off, which I didn't blame her for. I was frustrated, but I also kept telling myself she'd eventually see the situation the way I saw it. I genuinely believed I had done something compassionate, even if it came with some rough edges. I spent those first days convincing myself we just needed space and a calm conversation. That illusion ended the minute she finally walked into the house. She came in quietly, no yelling, no tears, no dramatic entrance, but half her things were already gone. Closets half empty, bathroom drawers cleared. She moved like someone who had already made decisions I didn't know existed. She told me she was staying with her sister for a while. She didn't explain anything beyond that. She didn't want to talk about the snowstorm, or Dylan, or the hotel. She didn't want to hear anything I had to say. She just said she needed space, and she didn't know when she'd be back. The part that stuck with me wasn't the anger I expected. It was the calm, almost detached, like she had stored whatever she felt in a box and sealed it shut. I didn't understand why she was treating me like I'd crossed some irreversible line. I kept thinking she was blowing everything out of proportion, but the more hours passed, the more I realized her silence wasn't emotional distance. It was preparation. I reached out to her sister because I wanted clarification. She didn't soften anything. She said my wife came to her shivering so badly she could barely hold a mug, and that a doctor told her she was experiencing early hypothermia symptoms. That made my stomach drop because I had told myself she was being dramatic at the hotel. I didn't know it had gotten that bad. Her sister said I made a choice that night that told my wife exactly where she stood in my priorities. She didn't yell. She just said it like it was a fact I needed to stare in the face. I don't know what was worse, hearing all of that, or the fact that it all made sense when she said it. The real hit landed when I saw the medical documentation confirming the hypothermia symptoms. That's when my defensiveness cracked. More than embarrassment, more than guilt, it was the realization that I had genuinely put her in danger without even thinking to check on her. When I called her to talk, she didn't answer. She only texted that she wasn't done dealing with everything yet. That's the part that scared me. She didn't say she wasn't done with me, or the marriage, or the argument. She just said she wasn't done. There was a determination in the way she phrased it that made my chest feel tight. This doesn't feel like a temporary separation anymore. It feels like a storm I didn't see coming until it was already tearing the roof off. Update 2. The first real shock came when I realized she had already spoken to a lawyer. I only found out because she left a folder sitting on the counter. I hadn't noticed it at first. Dylan had been around, making himself comfortable in the house, keeping me distracted, and I wasn't paying attention, but once I saw it, I froze. It was full of notes about the snowstorm night, everything she could document about my choices, timelines, messages, even statements from the hotel. She had reached out to her family and mine before she even came home and explained the situation her way. The amount of forethought in that was staggering. I had genuinely thought this was just a marriage fight, a night of bad judgment, but she had already turned it into leverage. When I tried to call her, she ignored me. Not in a leave me alone kind of way, but in a this is bigger than you, and you're not in control way. I kept checking on her and left messages. Nothing. Finally, I called her sister, hoping for some context. That was when I got the brutal perspective that hit harder than anything else in this saga. Her sister told me she had found my wife shivering when she arrived, barely able to hold a cup of tea. Her doctor noted early signs of hypothermia. She wasn't exaggerating at the hotel. She had been in real danger. That fact hit me like a wall. All my rationalizations about just one night, and I was doing the right thing, fell apart in seconds. I had literally put her at risk for someone else's comfort. Then came the family angle. I had assumed my mom and sister would be defensive for me, like they usually are, and that even if they had concerns about my judgment, they'd be on my side in the big picture. That didn't happen. They were furious, not shocked or surprised, furious. Apparently, my wife had already told them everything before she came back. They called me out not just on the snowstorm night, but on months of behavior they said had shown a pattern, putting friends and obligations above her well-being, ignoring her emotional needs, taking other people's comfort for granted. It was harsh, but I couldn't argue that it wasn't justified, and it came from my own family, which made it feel like the ground under me was gone. Meanwhile, Dylan didn't help. He decided to stay in the house for a few days under the guise of supporting me, helping me get through this. But the more time he spent around me, the more I realized he was quietly poisoning my perspective. He constantly reinforced that I had done nothing wrong, that everyone else was exaggerating, that I was being attacked unfairly. I wanted to trust him because I have always trusted him, but something felt off. He kept subtly steering me away from reflecting on my own mistakes and toward blaming her for overreacting. At the time, I didn't see the full extent of it. I started digging a little to try to make sense of everything. That's when I realized Dylan had been spinning the story to anyone who would listen, painting me as emotionally abusive and reckless. He told mutual friends that my wife had mental health episodes that made her unpredictable and that I was just trying to survive, not realizing how unstable she was. Hotel staff? He apparently told them she was fragile and had medical issues, framing me as the one in control and her as erratic. Suddenly, it wasn't just our home, our family, and our friends. It was the broader circle, all influenced by him. Then came the letter from her lawyer, temporary separation. She was requesting exclusive use of the house, and I was expected to respect that immediately. It was formal, cold, and completely blindsided me. I read it over and over, thinking there had to be some mistake, some way to fight it. But there wasn't. Every clause, every request had been anticipated and set up before I even had the chance to process anything. My sense of being in control of my own life evaporated. Finally, I confronted her directly. I asked for answers, for an explanation beyond the lawyer letters, beyond the family lectures, and she broke, not in tears or screaming, just a calm, focused intensity. She told me plainly, this didn't start at the hotel. This didn't start with the snowstorm. It had been going on for months, maybe longer, and I hadn't noticed. I had let Dylan get in between us, shape her perception, and manipulate me, all while I thought I was protecting a friend. She had proof screenshots, recordings, messages, everything Dylan had said or done to interfere with our marriage. Little comments over text, stories he twisted, arguments he escalated, all calculated to make me look like the one at fault, and her the victim. I couldn't believe it at first. I wanted to dismiss it. I kept replaying every conversation in my head, asking how I hadn't seen it, but the evidence was too precise, too consistent. He had been interfering for almost a year, quietly, strategically. My blind loyalty had given him free rein. That night in the snowstorm wasn't just a mistake, it was the culmination of months of manipulation, and I walked right into it. The full realization hit me slowly, and then all at once. I had been protecting the wrong person for longer than I wanted to admit. I had prioritized Dylan's comfort, his convenience, his drama over my wife's safety and well-being. I had failed her repeatedly, and the consequences were stacking faster than I could process. I had friends turning distant, family judging me, my wife pulling away, Dylan embedding himself as a victim, and me, completely blind, thinking I was being a good friend. Now, I'm forced to face it. Every choice, every compromise, every time I allowed him to take precedence over her, it all mattered. And the snowstorm night wasn't the mistake. It was the signal that I had been ignoring the pattern long enough for it to become dangerous. Update 3. It started with confronting Dylan. I told him straight. He needed to leave. At first he laughed, tried to brush it off, and then I saw it, the real Dylan, panicked, almost desperate. He started crying, begging me not to push him out, accusing me of abandoning him when he had always been there for me. It was unnerving to watch. For the first time, I saw just how manipulative he was. Every casual comment, every insistence that he was just helping, every slight nudge toward my wife being difficult or overreacting, suddenly clicked. He had been controlling everything from the sidelines, and I had allowed it because I was blind to the warning signs. I didn't back down. I told him this wasn't up for debate, and he had to leave immediately. He hesitated, tried one last guilt trip, and then finally left. I felt a mix of relief and disgust. Relief that the manipulative presence was gone. Disgust at myself for letting it go on as long as it had. Watching him leave, I realized I had sacrificed more than a night's comfort for someone who never saw me as a friend. He wasn't a friend. He was a manipulator who used my loyalty as a weapon. After that, I reached out to my wife's sister. She told me something I didn't know, something that made my stomach twist. Apparently, Dylan had once tried to message my wife privately at 2 a.m. while drunk. I had never been aware of it. The thought of how long he had been weaving himself into our lives, trying to create these secret connections and exploit moments when he could, was infuriating. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed sooner. My blind loyalty had given him free rein, and now I was dealing with the consequences. The next step was talking to my wife. I wanted to approach her carefully because I knew she had been building walls, preparing for months, and I didn't want to trigger more damage. We finally sat down and talked like adults for the first time in months. It was tense and awkward at first, but the conversation started to flow. I asked her for honesty, and she didn't hold back. That's when she revealed one more thing, something that hit me like a punch. Dylan had told her that I had once called her dead weight in the marriage. I had never said anything like that, ever. It was a total fabrication, a lie designed to destabilize our relationship and make her doubt me. She had been hearing it from him and internalizing it for months while I thought I was the one defending our marriage from chaos. I could feel the anger rising, but it was mixed with shame. I was angry at Dylan, at his audacity, and at the way he had manipulated both of us. But I was also ashamed that I had let it happen. I had put someone else's comfort above my marriage for a night, and in doing so, I gave him the opening he needed to plant seeds of doubt and resentment. The reality hit me hard. The snowstorm night wasn't just a mistake. It was the moment everything I cared about became vulnerable. I knew I couldn't just let this play out behind the scenes anymore. I had to confront Dylan publicly, in front of friends who had been influenced by him, some of whom had started pulling away from me based on the stories he had been spinning. I organized a small gathering and confronted him directly. I laid it all out: his lies, his manipulations, the messages he had sent to my wife, the things he had told mutual friends, and the way he had interfered in our marriage. The look on his face shifted from disbelief to panic, then to desperation. It was ugly and messy, and yes, humiliating, but it was necessary. He eventually broke down and admitted the truth. He had been afraid I would drift away once I became a father someday. That was it. Not concern, not friendship, fear, and jealousy. He wanted to control my life under the pretense of being a friend. After Dylan left, I felt a sick, hollow weight in my chest. The reality was undeniable. I had spent months protecting the wrong person. I had prioritized someone else's comfort and insecurity over my wife's safety and trust, and that night in the snowstorm had been the tipping point. Everything else had been setting the stage for that one decision. The conversation with my wife didn't end there. She admitted that she had seriously considered filing for divorce. I wasn't shocked, and I wasn't angry. She had every right to be upset. What surprised me was her willingness to see if I could take accountability, not just for the snowstorm night, but for letting Dylan manipulate us for so long. She wanted to know if I could cut him out permanently, if I could finally put my loyalty to the right people. It was a test of sorts, and I knew that passing it wouldn't be about pride or ego. It would be about proving I could protect the relationship and rebuild trust. I'm still in the aftermath of all this. Friends are conflicted, some supportive, some distant. My family has weighed in again, and the dynamic has shifted completely. My wife and I are talking, cautiously, trying to understand the damage that's been done and what steps we can take to prevent it from happening again. I don't know if she's coming back fully, but I do know this. The night in the snowstorm wasn't just a mistake. It was the culmination of months of bad choices on my part and manipulation by someone I trusted too much. Final update. The first big step was couples therapy. My wife and I agreed to go not to magically fix the marriage, but to at least understand what's left and see if there's even a path forward. It's been grueling. We talk, we fight, we cry, and sometimes we just sit in silence. Some sessions have been worse than others. The hardest part is listening to her talk about how safe and supported she hasn't felt for months, all while I realize how much I prioritize someone else's comfort over her safety. I keep thinking about that night in the snowstorm, how my insistence that Dylan stay in our room was supposed to be an act of compassion, and how it ended up being the exact opposite. Therapy has been brutal, but it's been the only way to confront the full scope of what I've done wrong. She refuses to move back in. She wants space, wants to rebuild separately, and I can't blame her. After all the manipulation, the lies, and my own failures, she has every right to do that. She's been interviewing for jobs out of town, looking for a fresh start, and I can't deny that it terrifies me, but it also makes me realize something important. Her actions aren't about punishing me. She isn't trying to hurt me. She's protecting herself. That's a perspective I couldn't take before, because I was too wrapped up in my own guilt and my own anger at Dylan. Speaking of Dylan, he's officially gone from my life. I cut him out completely, blocked him on everything. He tried reaching out to my family, trying to pull the same strings he always did, but I shut it down immediately. I refused to give him any more leverage. Watching him spiral has been satisfying in a weird way, but I can't let that distract me from the real issue. I've got to rebuild what I can from the wreckage he helped create. I can't undo the past, but I can stop him from controlling anything else. The house situation has been strange. I moved into a smaller place temporarily while she stays in the house. Neither of us is comfortable with it, but it's necessary. It gives her space and gives me room to reflect. For the first time in months, I can breathe without feeling like someone else's lies are dictating every decision I make. I've had time to really think about the snowstorm night, about how it was a tipping point, but also how it wasn't the only problem. The marriage was already rotting because I allowed a toxic friend to stand between us. That night just exposed the weakness in a way I couldn't ignore. We agreed on a trial separation for 6 months. It's not a divorce. It's not a reconciliation. It's just a pause to see if we can even exist in the same world, without the constant tension and manipulation. I've accepted that there's no guarantee we'll end up together after this, and honestly, I'm terrified of what that means. I've been reflecting a lot on loyalty and what it costs when it's misplaced. I think I finally understand it now. What's weird is how much clarity comes from the pain. I can see now that I didn't just lose her that night in the snowstorm. I lost her the day I made someone else's comfort more important than her safety. That's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I can't let myself ever prioritize someone who doesn't have my family's best interests at heart, no matter how long we've known them or how much I convince myself it's the right thing. That loyalty nearly destroyed everything that mattered to me. The hardest part, though, is living with the uncertainty. I don't know if she'll come back after these 6 months, if we'll rebuild together, or if she'll find something new out there that I can't compete with. The house feels emptier than ever, and the nights are long, but at the same time, I feel a strange sense of relief. I'm finally facing the truth, finally dealing with the consequences, and finally taking responsibility for the things I can control. That's more than I could have said a month ago.